Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today is July 6th, 2026, and we're jumping into a seriously fascinating journey to understand the very fabric of American identity. We'll be unpacking some truly groundbreaking sociological research by Dr. Deborah J. Schildkraut, but we're going to do something a bit different. We're going to view her modern findings through the epic, sweeping lens of early North American history.
Okay, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the American identity question, trace the first arrivals, explore diverse indigenous civilizations, examine the European contact, and finally, bring it all together by looking at our multi-creedal foundation.
All right, diving right into Section 1, the American identity question. What makes an American?
It's kind of the ultimate question, isn't it? What actually makes someone an American? To figure this out, we're looking at a pivotal 2007 study by Dr. Schildkraut. She wanted to know if the increasing ethnic diversity of the United States is actually changing the unwritten rules of American identity. Basically, as the population shifts and changes, do the standards for what makes someone American change along with it?
Well, the crucial point we need to understand is the multiple traditions theory. Dr. Schildkraut's research provides hard data confirming this idea. Her study shows that an increasingly multicultural America essentially creates a multi-creedal America, meaning the foundation of the country isn't just one single rigid standard of Americanism. Actually, scratch that, it's more like a broad, super complex, and honestly sometimes contradictory set of norms. And the really wild part? Her study found that most Americans, regardless of their ethnic or immigrant background, totally share this complex view.
Moving right along to Section 2, the first arrivals, tracing the deep roots.
To really get this, we have to zoom out, way out. The scale of this history is absolutely immense. Imagine, 30,000 years ago, early humans are trekking across the icy Beringia land bridge. Fast forward to 10,000 BCE, and they've completely spread across the continent, surviving by hunting giant megafauna. But, they were incredibly adaptable. As the climate shifted, so did they. Around 8,000 BCE, folks in central Mexico actually started farming, while others, like the Na-Dene speakers, were navigating all the way up to the Pacific Northwest by 5000 BCE.
And even among those earliest inhabitants, diversity was already the name of the game. Just think about the distinct designs of early fluted spear points. You had the Clovis culture living around 9100 BCE, and then you had the Folsom culture. Both were incredible groups of innovators, yet they engineered entirely different solutions and designs for their tools. Diversity of thought right from the very beginning.
That brings us to Section 3, diverse indigenous civilizations, diverse ways of life. Fast forward a bit more, and pre-Columbian North America is just an absolute explosion of variety. In the southeast, the Hopewell tradition is building these massive earthwork mounds and running expansive trade networks. If you travel to the southwest, you'd find the Anasazi literally engineering stone pueblos straight into sheer cliff faces. And then up on the Pacific coast, communities were thriving in permanent fishing villages, centering their lives around elaborate gift-giving feasts called potlatches. These aren't just different building styles. We're talking about entirely distinct social fabrics.
Now wrap your head around this number, 20,000. That was the estimated 12th century peak population of Cahokia. It was a massive Mississippian city near modern-day St. Louis, anchored by a colossal 100-foot-tall earthwork called Monk's Mound. To put that into perspective, at its absolute height, this complex indigenous metropolis actually had a larger population than London did at the exact same time. No way, right?
Meanwhile, further east in present-day upstate New York, we see the rise of the Iroquois Confederacy in the mid-15th century. This was an alliance of 5 totally distinct tribes, the Oneida, Mohawk, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca, all governed by a group of 50 sachem chiefs. It's really fascinating because this early form of multi-creedal governance, bringing different groups under one shared system, is widely thought to have heavily influenced later political thinking during the actual founding of the United States government.
All right, Section 4, the European contact, fragmented influences. So when we talk about European contact, we have to remember it wasn't just this one neat single event. The earliest recorded European mention of America actually comes from a medieval chronicler named Adam of Bremen way back in 1075, who talked about Norse settlements in Vinland. It wasn't until hundreds of years later, in 1493, that Spanish colonizers arrived in the Caribbean and encountered indigenous populations like the Taíno in Puerto Rico, people who had already been living there for generations.
The truth is, European influence was absolutely not a monolith. It was a chaotic, fragmented push by deeply competitive nations. You had the Spanish pushing into Florida and Texas, the Dutch setting up New Netherland in the mid-Atlantic, and the French and English colonists all aggressively staking their own claims. They brought new crops and animals, for sure, but they also brought devastating old-world diseases that completely decimated the native societies they encountered. This wasn't one culture arriving, it was a radical, incredibly disruptive collision of entirely different worlds.
Finally, Section 5, a multi-creedal foundation. Let's take it back to the modern perspective.
So, returning to Dr. Schildkraut's study, she concludes, a complex and contradictory set of norms exist, and it is difficult to reduce them into a single measure of Americanism. Her research essentially proves that this messy, highly complex set of norms is exactly what binds the country together today. And again, this intricate view is shared by most Americans right now, whether their families have been here for 200 years or they just immigrated last year.
Putting it all together, the big takeaway is this. The whole multiple traditions theory isn't just some new modern phenomenon born out of recent multiculturalism. As our timeline clearly showed, the foundation of this continent has literally always been a complex tapestry, from tens of thousands of years of incredible indigenous diversity and multi-creedal governance to the highly fragmented waves of European colonization. This land has just never been defined by one single culture or idea. It's always been a mix.
Which kind of leaves us with a huge, fascinating question to chew on. When you really step back and look at the sheer scale of the history we just explored today, how do you view your own identity in the context of this massive, deeply diverse timeline? I really hope this explainer gave you a fresh perspective on the complex roots of American identity. Thank you so much for hanging out and exploring this with me. Keep asking those great questions, and I'll see you next time.